What's up my bro, Tundrum here, back with another video, and today I'm going to be showing you my budget $50 Fynn the Fangbearer EDH deck. Now this deck, I didn't even intend for it to be budget, but I've had this deck since Fynn's come out. It's very strong, and it turns out most of the cards it uses are just really cheap cards, not expensive, but it works so well. It destroys in 1v1s, and 1v1s, it's not CEDH, of course. It's a creature-based deck. You can't really get CEDH with creature-based decks, but it is very strong on the top end of things that aren't CEDH for regular decks. It destroys in 1v1s, and in multiplayer games, it wins me a lot of multiplayer games, a lot more than you would expect. The pressure with having Fynn and all the Deathtouch creatures, along with all your regular Infect and Poison threats, it can become a huge issue for your opponents. Now, originally my deck cost about $110, just thanks to 4 more expensive cards, which we'll get to later. But I just cut those out for slightly more budget versions, and now it's $50 for a super strong EDH deck. I reckon one of the best powerful EDH decks you can get on a budget. But yeah, it's a good deck. It's got a really low curve. So it only runs, I think, 35, 36 lands, not the normal 37 or 38, but it works really well. So this video is going to be split into 5 sections. Section 1, Deathtouch and Infect creatures and win cons. So this is your primary Infect win cons, things like Proliferate, Deathtouch, Infect. This will finish them off and kill them. Pump spells and enchantments that pump up all your creatures. This is handy to trample over with your Deathtouch creatures or kill more when they're double blocking, or more importantly with our Infect creatures, it gets through, we pump it up and suddenly they're taking a ton of damage. Interaction and protection, which is things like removal, regeneration, things like that helps our creatures survive and destroys theirs. Fight effects and creatures you control deal damage equal to their power to target creature an opponent controls. Due to most of our stuff having Deathtouch, those effects are insane. Like, take Overpowered Tracker, for example. Every turn, this is just about a removal spell. Then we have utility and ramp. Things like ramp and utility things that draw us cards, make things cost less, etc, etc. And finally, we have the mana base, which is a few utility non-basics and then just forests. So without further ado, let's get into it by looking at the commander, Fynn the Fangbearer. Fynn the Fangbearer is a 2-mana 1/3 legendary creature human warrior with Deathtouch. And it says, whenever a creature you control with Deathtouch, this includes himself, deals combat damage to a player, that player gets 2 poison counters. So this essentially turns all our Deathtouches into really solid creatures that can 5-hit your opponents. This combined with regular Infect and Trample effects can really kill your opponents quick. Imagine turn 1 Deathtouch into turn 2 Fynn. They've already got 2 poison. Turn 3, swing them with both of them, they then have 6 poison, and you might also play something else. Next turn, turn 4, you can easily finish off opponents that early, if not earlier. He's really good aggro commander, got to be one of the best poison-based commanders out there. But yeah, let's get into it. So first up we have our primary win cons, Deathtouch and Infect. First up we have Nullwood Dryad. 1-mana 1/1 Deathtouch, we're running all the 1/1 Deathtouches we can, and it also gets a nice 2/2 buff if we have Delirium online. Sedge Scorpion, 1-mana 1/1 Deathtouch, hits them for damage. They'll either have to take the hit, get 2 poison, which is 1/5 of their life total, or trade off a creature to it, which is good because it's only a 1-drop. Another 1/1 Deathtouch, same thing applies, and another 1/1 Deathtouch, same thing applies. We then have Glistener Elf. Glistener Elf is probably one of the strongest Infect creatures. Just a 1-mana 1/1 Infect, but all you need is a +2/+2/3/3, and suddenly this is dealing almost half your opponent's life in 1 hit. Nightshade Peddler. It's a 2-mana 1/1 with Soulbound, and as long as it's paired with another creature, both creatures have Deathtouch. So that even if you're pairing this with another already Deathtouch creature, it's still a 2-mana 1/1 Deathtouch. But if you pair it with, let's say, an Infect creature, or even something like a Fyndhorn or Llanowar Elves, then suddenly you have 2 really potential threat bodies, which is really solid. Pollen Blight Druid. It's a 1/1, which we have lots of things that give creatures Deathtouch, so it can actually turn into a threat. But most importantly, when it enters, it proliferates, which will give all our enemies a poison if they have one, and we also have a lot of 1/1 counter-based stuff, so this helps with those. Echoclomere, nice infect creature. Infect's really strong, as said before, and it also gets bigger when your enemies try to block it. Fawn-wheeled Archer, It's really good in defense if you need to, but most importantly, once again, a nice Deathtouch creature to swing in with. Deadly Recluse, pretty much the exact same as Fawn-wheeled Archer, solid. Plaguemare, ramps us if we need it, which we don't really need in this deck. We like our top end of our curve is a couple 5-drops, and I think we have 1 7-drop. But outside of that, it's normally 1, 2, 3, and 4 drops. Mostly 1, 2, and 3 drops. So we don't need to ramp too much, but even so, it's still nice 2-mana 1/1 Infect, which is still worth playing. Serpent's Gift. I haven't seen any decks run this at all, but really, you're sneaking in with just a little Fynn, one of your little ramp creatures, or something like a Pollen Bright Druid, or even your Infect creatures, and you cast this, suddenly they have 2 more poison coming at them without notice, which can actually be game-changing. Or you can also use it as kind of a removal spell to bump up your blocker if you need to. There is actually a way better version of this, Lace with Moonglove. It's 3 mana, gives them Deathtouch, and you draw a card, which I'd also be running, but I just couldn't find one in my collection. Courage in Crisis. Gets a 1/1 counter on a creature, then proliferates. Real nice, helps kill off our opponents, all our opponents, even if we've no creatures, and gives 2 1/1 counters to one of our creatures, which is real nice. Diggerback Basilisk, 3 mana 2/2 Deathtouch, solid, can get through for quite a lot of damage. Well, poison. Viridian Corruptor, another one of the stronger Infect creatures. It's a 2/2 Infect, which we already might be running for this cost, in fact we would be. But when it enters, it also destroys target artifacts, so it's a solid removal when it enters. Decimator Web. This just kind of slowly kills off our opponents. 4-drop artifact. We pay 4, tap it to make our opponent lose 2 life, get a poison counter, and then mill 6 cards. So this is kind of, it seems like a hefty cost, but doing this every turn, even if your opponent seems to stabilize, this puts them on a clock that can kill them in a couple of turns, which is really solid. Claw Prowler, 4 mana 2/2 Infect, which is also really solid, and when it dies, you get to proliferate. I've had situations where they just have to let this survive and just keep losing creature after creature, because if it died, they just lose the game there. The proliferation on it is really nice, combo with an Infect creature, one of the stronger cards. Bloomhulk, when it enters, it proliferates, which is once again really solid, gets through the poison even if we can't swing through with our creatures, buffs up things with counters, and it's also a 4/4 body, which with all those our effects that give other creatures Deathtouch, can be viable. Blight Widow, 2/4 reach Infect for 4 mana, pretty good, can get through, kill them off, especially if you have a pump spell. 4 mana seems like a lot, but you'll be surprised the amount of decks that still don't really have any major creatures on the field by turn 4. Plaguemore Beast, another one of those proliferate or poison spells that you can just keep pumping out late game to slowly finish off your opponents. Greater Basilisk, this has got to be probably the weakest creature in our deck. If I were to cut one, it would be this. It's a 5 mana 3/5 Deathtouch. The Deathtouch doesn't actually make it hit that hard. Like, if you think of it, poison's a 10th of their life. 3 life is like a 13th of their life anyway, so if you think of it that way, it doesn't actually get that much of an addition damage from Deathtouch, except our deck does focus around poison, if you know what I mean. I probably explained that really bad, but pretty much this is one of the weaker creatures on the deck due to it being so expensive and not really having anything else on it other than Deathtouch. Acidic Slime, this is a lot more powerful, 2/2 Deathtouch, which is alright on its own, and when it enters we get a destroy target artifact, enchantment, or land. This is a solid card on its own, but in our deck it gets even stronger. And that is our Infect and Deathtouch creatures and our primary win cons here. So this is really what we're going to be killing our enemies off, these and our commander. Everything else is just pump spells to make them deal more, removal to stop our opponents, protection to stop them from killing these, and ramp to make us get into these and other things quicker. So now we're on to our pump spells. I believe this is our smallest section. Well, actually, I just had a card that's meant to be in the other section, but never mind. So first up, we have Vines of the Vastwood. For 1 mana, it gives one of our creatures hexproof, but if we kick it for an extra mana, it also gives it 4/4. So either way, you can use this as a nice protection spell to stop one of our creatures from dying to removal. Or if you pay the extra 1 mana, it also gives it a 4/4. This is really strong. Seal of Strength. And it's an enchantment. We can play it and then sack it to give a creature free until end of turn. This is a nice kind of bluffy thing. Stops them from blocking because they know you can do this. If anything, it's better than, let's say, actual Giant Growth, even though this has the advantage of surprise, which is quite good. Giant Growth gives something free. This on an Infect creature, bam, tons of damage. This can let us kill off one of the enemy creatures in a combat exchange. Pretty solid. Might of Old Crowser either gives a creature 4/4 if we cast it on our main phase, or 2/2 at instant speed. Also really good. Rancor. Once you play Rancor, it's always going to come back. It gives a creature 2/0 and trample, which even just on a Fynn, making him a free Deathtouch trample, can be so hard for your enemies to deal with. Just destroy them. And when Rancor goes away, it goes back to your hand so you can play it again. Rancor alone is one of the strongest enchantments in the game, more auras at least. And in this deck, this is just the perfect deck for it. Super strong. Mutagenic Growth, even when we're tapped out, this can come out of nowhere and get tons of extra damage in on our opponents. Ruin of Might, I'm not sure about this, but it's 2 mana, it replaces itself, and it gives our creature 1/1 and trample. And we also have a few equipment which this goes well with. But I actually think this is worth it. Like, once again, it stops Fynn from being able to be chumped by 1/1s. Or on a bigger Deathtouch creature, or even an Infect creature, it can turn it into a big threat. Wild Size. Wild Size can just come out of nowhere. Trample over for extra... Give your creature trample so it can trample over. Gives them 2/2 so it makes it even stronger. So they can survive a combat exchange, deal more damage, etc. And it replaces itself. This doesn't seem strong on the surface, but trust me, this wins you games. Very strong card. Increasing Savagery. 4 mana, puts 5 1/1 counters on a creature, which is a lot, and we can flashback it for 7 and then give it 10 1/1 counters. This, for example, on a creature that has a way to give it trample, or has trample, or an Infect creature, this just makes it a 1-hit, pretty much. Very strong, along with the Proliferate as well, it can get even bigger again. Declare Dominance, I think... No, this kind of goes in the pump spell section. The thing's kind of crossed over between pump spells and interaction and protection, so there are a bit of it. Declare Dominance. It's a 5 mana sorcery to give target creature free until end of turn, and all creatures able to block it this turn do so. You might think this doesn't look good on the surface, but imagine this number 1, it makes it so they all, if you have, let's say, I'm just going to grab our first 3 creatures. These 3. You pump up 1, then suddenly they can't block these 2 and they're taking a huge chunk of damage. So that on its own is already alright. But the fact that our deck is all Deathtouch, well not all, a lot of Deathtouch, and it gives it a free, this is pretty much, you give it on one of your Deathtouch creatures, they can't block this turn, your other creatures, and it's essentially a one-sided board wipe. Let's say Fynn, they block with all 3 or 4 of their creatures, you just go 1 damage to each of them, boom, 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 their whole board is just gone. This on a Deathtouch creature to an opponent just destroys them. It is insane, trust me. Revenge of the Hunted, same thing, except even better. It's an additional mana, but it gives them 6/6 and trample as well, which is going to pretty much make this, once again, instantly kill their entire board, whatever you're giving it. This also works on Infect as well, because the Infect will trample over for damage. And 6/6 and trample means this creature as well, whichever creature you're pumping, will also likely get over for even more damage. And it has a miracle cost of 1, so you're just like, oh, I'll cast this for 1. Imagine that, turn 3 on your creature. They just look, imagine, yeah, or even turn 2. Imagine Glistener Elf turn 1, turn 2 Revenge of the Hunted Giant Growth. They just lose. They're dead. Turn 2 kill. This card, very strong. Plain-Wide Celebration. Pretty much what this does is 7 mana proliferate 4 times. If we need to, we can make 2/2 blockers, gain life, or return permanent cards. Often I'll end up returning 1 or 2 permanent cards and then proliferating twice with this. But yeah, this is our 7-drop. It's our top-end game-winning spell. This is just, yeah, half kills our opponents, and more often, if they don't counter it, just win the game if it resolves. Very strong card. So that's that section. We're now on to interaction and protection. Overmold Tracker, insane. For 2 mana and a tap, every turn, get one of our creatures to fight theirs, kill it off. Prey Upon, fight effect, good with Deathtouch creatures. Crumble, destroys an artifact. They do gain life equal to the artifact's casting cost, but we do not care about life. I have never won. Oh, there was once when in a 4-player game I killed an enemy with, I think, like a 3 or 4 power Deathtoucher just by killing them by damage, but that's because my enemies finished them off. 99% of the time, you don't care about their life total, it's just killing them with poison, so this is really 1 mana, destroy target artifact. Warbribe Blessing gives one of your creatures 2 extra toughness, which can actually be quite viable, and it makes it so it fights target creature an opponent controls when it enters. Nice removal. Rabid Bite, if we have a Deathtouch creature, destroys target creature pretty much. Rapid Vigor regenerates all of our creatures, so in a board wipe, this saves our entire board, although there are, like Wrath of God, it wouldn't, because they can't be regenerated. Board wipe saves our entire board. If we're swinging in and doing a bunch of trade-offs, we suddenly cast this, our stuff all survives. This can be quite a good game-changing spell. Clear Shot, we can use this just for the +1/+1 buff on an unblocked creature, and it also deals damage equal to its power, so as well as giving a nice 1/1 utility, it also kills off one of our enemy's creatures. This can change a combats completely. Lure, enchants a creature and makes all creatures able to block it do so. This is once again almost a one-sided board wipe every turn, which is really strong. Blood Scent, same thing, only happens once. Essentially clear dominance, but without the buff, and it costs 1 less. Really solid. Once again, could be a one-sided bull wipe and stops them from being able to block, which is quite strong. And Primal Might. This is green and an X, gives a creature XX and fights. So this is a massive buff if we have enough mana and kills one of our enemy creatures. Nice, strong card. And that's that section. Now we're on to utility and ramp. Fynn Torn Elves, nice, can get in for a bit of damage if we give it Deathtouch, make it a threat, and it ramps. Same with Elvish Mystic, and same with Llanowar Elves. Norwood Ranger, I probably shouldn't be running this. When I get to the more expensive version, of which it's only twice the cost, but the 4 cards do cost a lot. Yeah, the expensive version, take this out. I'm running it in here simply because this is the one deck where it can be viable, just being a creature, and the flavor text is really funny as well, goes with the deck. But the main reason I'm running it is because this card is actually the first ever Magic the Gathering card I got, so I was like, this is the only deck that's even remotely viable, so I just threw it in. But really, if you don't put this in yourself unless you for some reason want it, but that lore can be quite funny. You just attack in and suddenly bam, Deathtouch with one of the instants. Shaper's Sanctuary, whenever one of our creatures gets targeted, we draw a card. This gives us tons of value and makes it hard for our enemies to kill off our creatures. Wild Growth, nice little bit of ramp. Not actually that strong in this deck, so you could potentially take it out. Skeleton Key, this is really viable actually. I'm surprised. The Skulk, almost all our creatures have low power. Like even our bigger Deathtouch creatures only have 2 power. So this can almost often just make them unblockable. And it also draws cards and discards cards, so nice little bit of card filtering. And yeah, with an Infect creature, it's 1 power, attack in, they can't block. Before damage, suddenly cast a bunch of instants and just kill them. This is actually a very, very strong, one of the stronger cards in this deck. Doesn't seem like it, but it is. Winding Way, we choose creature or land, reveal the top 4, get all of that card type. So this can either get us into a few more creature threats or get us into a few lands in our hand if we need them. Tangled Florahedron can be played as a tap land for green if we need more land, or a little bit of a ramp creature. Can also be a little bit of utility if we need to get in with just a plain creature to give it Deathtouch at instant speed. Revive, I can't actually find, Regrowth I think is the card. I couldn't actually find a Regrowth for some reason. But Revive or Regrowth, they're pretty much the same thing. This returns any card other than a land from a graveyard to a hand. So also run Regrowth though if you can find it. Song of Freyalise, 2 mana Saga, gives all our creatures tap for 1 mana of any colour for 2 turns. Then, the third turn gives them all the counter, which is insane in this deck due to all the proliferation, and gives them Vigilance, Trample, and Indestructible until end of turn. This is alright, but this is why we're running it. Even if we just get this on 2 or 3 of our creatures, this generates so much value and is definitely worth it. Key to the City can give our creatures unblockable, which is really good. And we do have to discard cards, but that is worth it. And it can also give us some card filtering if we're willing to pay a bit of mana. Muon Vuli Beast Tracker. 2-1, which can kind of be useful. And it also gets any Deathtouch, Hexproof, Reach, or Trample creature and puts it on top of our deck. So this is most creatures in our deck, tutoring for any of them, which is quite good. Rishkar puts a 1-1 counter on 2 creatures, and both those creatures now tap for green. This is really strong if you want to proliferate them up. Gives us some ramp and can turn our Deathtouch or Infect creatures into an even bigger threat. Ronus's Monument makes all our creature spells cost 1 less. And this here, this is actually super strong in this deck. Giving a creature 2-turn trample is so viable on a Deathtouch or an Infect creature. This is insanely strong. Eldritch Evolution. I went over this in underrated EDH staples from Eldritch Moon. This card, it's so strong, especially in this deck. Essentially, what this is in this deck, because we have such a low curve, it's 3 mana, sacrifice a creature, search your library for any creature and put it onto the battlefield. That's what this might as well be. Not quite, but very, very close to it. Insanely strong. Replaces something we don't need anymore for a huge threat or a game-winning card. Gets us exactly what we need. Super strong. Nissa's Pilgrimage. The best out of Cultivate Kadama's Reach is in mono green is Nissa's Pilgrimage. This gets us 2 basic forests, 1 into play, 1 into hand. If we have Spell Mastery, it gets us 2 into hand as well. So quite solid. Ramp gets us lands. Not too strong in this deck, but can generate a lot of value. Lifecrafter's Beastery gets us Scry effects every turn, which can generate into tons of card advantage over time. And whenever we cast a creature spell, we may pay an extra 1 if we do draw a card. This just gets us tons of card advantage, really strong in this deck. And then finally, we have Wildest Dreams. Now this card, I don't see people running it, but I think it's really solid. You can either play it early game as for 3 mana to return any card, or 5 mana to return 2, which is actually quite a solid rate, or really late game for, let's say, 9 mana or 11 mana, suddenly it's a massive bomb and resurrects your entire graveyard. It's useful early and mid game, generates a fair bit of value, and is even stronger if you get it late game. Very strong card. Now, we're on to the mana base. So, pretty much mana base, I'll just go for it. Rogue's Passage. Land taps for colourless, but it can give our creatures unblockable, really strong. Forge of Heroes. Taps for colourless, and can also, if we want to tap it, give our commander a +1/+1 counter if we have it spare, which can generate a lot of value, especially in this deck, and we have Proliferate to utilise on that. Oran Reef. Really solid. Gives a 1/1 counter on all of our creatures that entered this turn if we tap it. And can also tap for green, really solid. Garenbrig does cost, I think, about $6 now, but is essentially just a way stronger forest in this deck, so you should really be running it. Khan's Bastion, really good. 4-tap Proliferate, they really can't deal with this, and this essentially, as soon as you have this on play and have the mana, puts them on a clock, and it slowly will wither them down and kill them off in 3, 4, maybe 5 turns. But this is very good. And then Tranquil Thicket, we can cycle it if we don't need it late game, and enters tapped, and taps for green if we need it. And Memorial to Unity. It does enter tapped, but we can pay free tap and sack it to dig 5 cards deep and get any creature out of them, which can be really nice fuel late game if we need it. The rest is just filled in with, I believe, 28 forests. And that is the main deck. I believe this deck currently, as of making this video, is I think $48, $47 to make on TCG. Now the cards I normally run, this will be swapping out for things like Nornwood Ranger for you, the weaker cards that I mentioned you don't really need to be running, or just any cards weaker. Triumph of the Hordes. I was pricing it up, and suddenly this went from, last time I checked, something like $4, this was a long time ago, to $20. So, very expensive card, but it gives all your creatures 1/1 and trample and infect until end of turn, which is game winning, so if you can get that in. Grafted Exoskeleton, which is, I believe, a $7 card, $5 card. It's not too expensive, but I didn't put it in the end because it put the deck over $50. But it pretty much gives a creature 4 mana equipment, equips, and gives a creature 2/2 and infect, which always gives us a massive threat, which is viable. Sword of Truth and Justice, which I believe is also a $20-$25 card, gives a creature 2/2 protection from white and blue, which is really good. And it says when it deals damage to a player, put a 1/1 counter on a creature you control and proliferate, which is game winning if you hit a player with this, so much value. And then we have Guardian Project, which this essentially says whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, draw a card. This can get us so much value. We can just go play. Very, very strong card. Definitely worth running. But yeah, with these, I believe the pricings are like $15, $20, $6, $20. So if you have these or are willing to make the investment, they're very, very strong game-winning cards, but the deck works nearly as well without them. And yeah, guys, that concludes the video, my Fynn the Fangbearer deck. I hope you enjoyed. If you want to see more from me, make sure to smash down on that subscribe and like button. And I hope to see you next time.